The Terminalist is an 8-episode Amazon series that dropped this year in 2022 and has a very interesting background that I'm going to share with you guys. But first, here is the official synopsis. A former Navy SEAL officer investigates why his entire platoon was ambushed during a high-stakes covert mission. And as I always do here on the Spun Today Podcast, I want to give a shout out to each and every one of the writers, because without them, series like these would not be possible. They are the absolute foundation of it all, in my opinion. Starting first and foremost with Jack Carr, the writer of the novel series The Terminalist, that was adapted into this show, and that I'm going to tell you guys a bit more about in a bit. Followed by David DeGilio, Tolu Awusika, Olumide Odebunmi, Henna Sikander, Max Adams, Lisa Long, John Lopez, Brooke Roberts, and Daniel Shattuck. Shout out once again to each and every one of those writers. Also, honorable mention to one of the directors of the series, Antoine Fuqua, who directed The Shooter, directed Training Day, etc., etc. So I want to start off with Jack Carr. Here is a bit of his background that I pulled from Goodreads. Jack Carr is a former Navy SEAL who led special operations teams as a team leader, platoon commander, troop commander, and task unit commander. Over his 20 years in naval special warfare, he transitioned from an enlisted SEAL sniper specializing in communications and intelligence to a junior officer leading assault and sniper teams in Iraq and Afghanistan, to a platoon commander practicing counterinsurgency in the southern Philippines, to commanding a special operations task unit in the most Iranian-influenced section of southern Iraq throughout the tumultuous drawdown of U.S. forces. Jack retired from active duty in 2016. He lives with his wife and 3 children in Park City, Utah. He is the author of the Terminalist book series, which, by the way, the 6th book in the series, the James Reese series as it's known, is coming out in the spring of 2023. Definitely look out for that. I personally have not read any of the books yet, but they are very popular, very well received, and I've heard other Navy SEALs describe the books as 98% real/accurate and 2% fiction. I want to, though. I want to read definitely at least the first book in the series, especially from the perspective of someone who wants to one day accomplish what Jack Carr did in terms of having one of his stories adapted to the screen. And just generally, it's always interesting, I think, at least for me, to see and note the differences between a book or a story and the visual adaptation and representation of that story. And Jack Carr is definitely one of the types of writers that pays uber attention to detail that I really, really appreciate and attempt to emulate in my own writing. That feel of authenticity is so important, even, and I think especially when playing and writing within the fiction realm. I feel like it matters most then. Like when you least expect it or don't even expect it to be there. Having that realism there grounds what you're doing and also helps sell the fiction even more because you establish that foundational level of trust with your reader. But yeah, I first heard Jack Carr on Rogan, and he's been there at least a couple times, I want to say. And his passion for his writing is infectious. Like that alone makes me want to check out his stuff. Like someone that really cares about what they're doing. I definitely appreciate that. And he told this really cool story on the podcast about how his protagonist was cast for this TV version story of his books. Spoiler alert, it's Chris Pratt. And as always, I'll link to that video clip in the episode notes if you guys want to check it out. But I love stories like this and wanted to share with you guys. So he started writing the first book in the series back in 2014. And according to him, he always envisioned Chris Pratt as the protagonist while he was writing the book. And now this is Chris Pratt before Avengers and Jurassic Park, before mega superstar Chris Pratt. At this point, he said that Chris Pratt had done like Parks and Rec, but that he had like a very small 2-line role in a movie called Zero Dark 30, where he played a Navy SEAL. And for some reason that just stayed with him, and he always envisioned Chris Pratt as the protagonist that he was writing. So now he has the first book written. It hasn't come out yet. And a friend of his from the SEAL teams calls him out of the blue. He hadn't spoken to this guy in like 5 years. And he called him to thank him because when he was transitioning out of the SEAL teams, Jack Carr helped him in terms of like what to expect, and, you know, put him in touch with some like private sector people that he can work with, and gave him advice, etc. And he wanted to tell him that things are going well for him and that he really appreciates it, and just wanted to let him know. And then he was like, oh, and I heard you wrote a book. And Jack Carr was like, yeah, you know, I actually just wrapped it up. It's not out yet, but I could definitely send you a pre-release copy. And his friend was like, yeah, that'll be great. But I also want to give it to a friend of mine, if you don't mind. Then Jack Carr was like, yeah, sure. Who's your friend? And he was like, Chris Pratt. How sick is that? And then his boy actually comes through, gives it to his friend, Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt reads it, loves it. And before the book even comes out, he options it to have the rights for either the movie or TV series. And obviously it ultimately became a TV series, which Chris Pratt is the protagonist and star of, exactly as Jack Carr envisioned it as he was writing his first book in 2014. Now that in and of itself is a dream come true, but the cherry on top is that Chris Pratt wanted Jack Carr to still be involved with the series and like the making of the series, which is not always the case. It's actually not, usually it's not the case, because when a book or a story gets optioned, it's like they're paying for like the licensing of it, like the right to use your story, and that's it. It's like a transactional thing. Here's X amount of dollars that you agree to. Give us the rights to do whatever the fuck we want with your story and put it on screen. You're no longer involved. Peace. We'll let you know when it comes out. And that's why there's always like a lot of stories that you hear and friction between like a writer of a book that is like, oh, they butchered the movie, or I hated the way the movie came out. And I always used to wonder, like, didn't you write the fucking movie? Like, I mean, didn't you write the story? So how could the movie not be good? You know what I mean? Like, it's your thing. But it's because of that, because the writer is Heisman'd out of the way once they option the rights, because, you know, it's a different medium, it's a different beast, it's a different animal, you know, whether it's a TV show or a movie from a book. And they have to take creative license to keep it true to the source material as much as possible, but also with the main goal of making a successful movie or TV show, and, you know, take creative license with whatever they need to change things here and there, or speed things up here and there, which is going to change from format to format, whether it's a half-hour show, an hour-long show, an 8-episode series, a 10-episode series, a 12-episode series, a multi-season show, a movie, a 3-hour movie, a 2-hour movie, a 1-hour movie, you know, etc., etc. But Chris Pratt, again, wanted Jack Carr involved in the process, so he was involved in writing the pilot episode, and I think involved, at least to some extent, with all 8 of the episodes thereafter, which Jack Carr just described as like an amazing experience that he was appreciative of, because he got to, you know, be involved in that world and also start learning about script writing, which is a different beast, and, you know, what it takes just to make and create a show. He gets to see that firsthand. That's invaluable. That's amazing. Now, circling back to the show, which had like really good actors in it, by the way. Aside from Chris Pratt, you have Constance Wu, which was amazing in the series, and I love the way she acts. She was in that Hustler movie with J-Lo. She was in Fresh Off the Boat. She played the mom. 2 completely different roles. She was in that Amazon series Solos, which I kind of liken to like Black Mirror-ish, but not really. Sort of kind of within the same vein. Great actress. Taylor Kitsch, who played Ben Edwards, was great in it. JD Pardo, who played Tony LaYoon, which was like the main cop that was after James Reese, which is, again, Chris Pratt's character. Oh, you know who's in it? Christina Vidal. She played Mac Wilson. She was the girl in that Michael J. Fox movie called Life with Mikey, when Michael J. Fox was a kid actor and then grew up to be like a washed up kid actor. That's like what they mainly knew him for. And he and his brother had a talent agency for other kid actors. And she played the Spanish girl that had the Starburst cookie commercial. Anyway, dope movie from back in the day. Life with Mikey, check it out. She's in it. And it was a really cool series. It was dark, very dark, in terms of some of the things that went on. Some of which I'm going to spoil for you guys. So if you haven't seen the series, now would be the time to check out. But it's definitely really suspenseful and thrilling. You're definitely going to get a lot of tactical military stuff, gunfights, a satisfying revenge story. The series starts off with James Reese, which is again Chris Pratt's character, and his platoon on a covert mission somewhere overseas in the Middle East. And they get ambushed. His entire platoon gets wiped out. He's almost killed and gets rescued by, I want to say, Army Rangers, but I'm not sure if that's accurate. And then after the fact, he returns home. He has a wife. He has a young daughter. He's dealing with all the stresses and logistics of just the funerals of his men, trying to figure out what went wrong. He's getting these really bad headaches that initially he believes is just from the grenade blast and shit that he recovered from. But then we later come to find that some of the higher-ups within the Navy okayed this experimental drug for James Reese and his team to take that were supposed to help them deal with PTSD, because they go on, these types of missions all the time. And it was an experimental drug that they thought would help. Jack Hart, to his credit, explained in detailed the mechanism by which the drug suppressed the neocortex response to the hippocampus, or this, that, and the other, that was responsible for PTSD-like memories or something like that. But what it resulted in was his entire team, his entire platoon, growing tumors in their heads. And this ambushed mission that they were on was planned to kill them, to kill, any evidence of this experimental drug that some of the higher-ups within the Navy okayed to be used on unwitting American soldiers. So the series entails James Reese's character uncovering this and turning over stone after stone and piecing things together little by little and finding out just how deep the rabbit hole goes, who's involved, how far up the chain of command does this go, and then methodically, using, of course, all of his experience and expertise in being such a decorated sniper and Navy SEAL, getting revenge on what was done to his men. Now, where I first realized that this wasn't going to be just a cookie cutter PG-13, very black and white kind of, there's good guys, there's bad guys, the good guy gets all the bad guys and everybody loves the good guy at the end. It wasn't going to be that type of story. And where it took an immediately dark turn was when the powers that be that, greenlit this ambush find out that James is still alive and they try to have him killed. Because there was actually, I think, one other person that survived the ambush, and that person supposedly, quote unquote, committed suicide. And James Reese was like, this guy would have never fucking committed suicide. And he did it with his SEAL team service pistol, which was they made it seem like that was a major, no, SEAL team member would ever do that with their personal service pistol or something like that. It'd be this huge taboo thing, even if they did do that, kill themselves. And he felt something was off with that. And then they come after him. Then he definitely realizes something's off. And, he's at the doctor getting an MRI for these headaches and shit. And somebody kills the doctor and he's ambushed by these two guys that he winds up killing one of them and then wounding the other, but the other gets away. And then he rushes home after that to find his wife and daughter killed. That's when I knew. I was like, oh shit. And that all happened in episode 1, by the way. Episode 1, maybe episode 2, but I think episode 1. I was like, oh fuck. So they pretty much set up the story where you have this guy whose entire platoon gets wiped out under very sketchy circumstances. Somebody's trying to cover something up and comes after him, kills his wife and kid, and he has a terminal brain tumor growing in his head. So he has zero to lose. And he happens to be this decorated, skilled Navy SEAL, badass sniper guy whose plan for revenge just unfolds thereafter. Episode by episode. It gets deeper, more people get onto his list, the AKA terminal list, and he starts wiping them out one by one. He has help from 2 or 3 people that are, tight in his life. One of his best friends who was in the CIA, a couple other family friends who were also in the military. Candace Wu's character, which plays a reporter that was initially, doing a story about this, but winds up uncovering things herself and witnessing someone actually try to kill James Reese, and then realizes, oh no, he's not crazy. There is some crazy shit going on, and they're trying to kill him and cover something up. And it's like the story of a lifetime for her. So she's incentivized in the same direction as him of getting to the truth. So it kind of works out as like a win-win for them there, at least at first, because she gets him some information and vice versa. And it's crazy. Like, one of the first people that he gets revenge on that's involved in this whole thing. Like, I think it was that guy actually that went to go kill him when he was in the hospital doing his MRI. Once he tracks him down, which he was like a medium level Mexican cartel guy, he like ambushes where he's at. Him, the CIA guy, the other friend that was also in the military. The character name is Liz Riley, played by Tyner Rushing, who did a great job as well. She was a pilot in the military, so she like would fly them around and shit. The ambush where this cartel guy is and killing everybody that resisted, and he gets to the guy, just fucks him up, then hangs him up with chains like by his hands. They're like in this like warehouse kind of place, and James Reese just slashes his stomach open with a knife, pulls out his intestines, and just starts strangling him with his fucking intestines. I was like, that is so fucking badass. I've never seen that. And it's just like dope, satisfying revenge stories like that all throughout, as he catches up to each and every other person that was involved. And I'm definitely not going to ruin everything for you guys, so definitely still watch it. But I do want to share a couple of dope lines of dialogue that I liked. There's a point where James is speaking to Ben, his CIA buddy Ben Edwards, played by Taylor Kitsch. And James Reese asks him, do you think I'm losing my mind? Because that's what a lot of people are telling him, like these headaches that he's getting, and he's like misremembering things, and he's like conflating facts of stuff that happened, which is actually going on. But there's also nefarious people trying to play up that angle for obvious reasons, right? Because they're trying to cover shit up. So from James Reese's perspective, it's like, fuck, I am mixing up details, because even certain things that I'm like flashbacking on, I know objectively are like two different dates of things that happened with my wife and daughter. But I also know motherfuckers are trying to kill me, so hard to know who to trust here. But anyway, he asks Ben, do you think I'm losing my mind? And Ben responds to him, and I love this line. He goes, no, but I think you got your deck shuffled really good. I just love that analogy. I hadn't heard that before. And it made me think from a writing perspective of other ways to write that exact same thing. Like a famous one you always hear is that you got your bell rung. You got your bell rung really good. But I never heard you got your deck shuffled really good. So that's like definitely one of those lines that, at least for me, gets your creative juices flowing, if you will. I thought this next line was dope on a couple levels. There's a scene where the FBI agent asks Reese, while they're in the jungle and they're trying to track him, because he's now being tracked by law enforcement, FBI, because local police, military, etc., because they think that he went crazy and he killed his own family at first. Like, he was a suspect and they cleared him from that, but they do know that he's going around trying to kill people that were involved. And while he's hiding out in the woods and shit, they almost catch up to him, and one of the FBI agents asks him, or I think it may have been Tony Layune, played by J.D. Pardo, who did great, who he was like a head detective, but had some military background as well. So he was like working in conjunction with the FBI, if I remember correctly. And he said something to the effect of, what will your dad say now about what you did in San Francisco? And in San Francisco, it was like, one of the other guys that James Reese caught up with and murked. And Reese responded, he would say it would be a mistake to push a man to violence if violence is what he's dedicated his life to perfecting. That was such a dope line in and of itself, and also in response to that like heart-to-heart moment that the FBI agent was trying to have with him, mentioning his father, trying to make him reflect on his actions. And then James Reese just responds with this like doubling down on his mindset of, motherfucker, nobody's getting in the way of what I'm doing. Do you not understand that I have zero to live for? That was crazy. And then just two more lines that I want to share with you guys that, by the way, are not any better or worse than any of the other lines or dialogue within the series. They're just, for whatever reason, lines that resonated with me in the moment. And I jot them down to share with you fine folks. So Secretary of State Hartley, played by Jean Triplehorn, is speaking to Katie Buranek, played by Constance Wu, the reporter, after Katie put out she sent an editor of a paper that she worked with or sold stories to, and sent him an email with, a full investigative journalism article on James Reese really being innocent, and that this whole cover-up of the experimental drug goes beyond the pharmaceutical company that stood to make a couple billion. It included high-ranking officers within the military that gave the green light, including Secretary of Defense Lorraine Hartley, etc., etc. And she's in the library putting the final touches on this article. Calls the guy that she's going to send it to, the editor, character named Jordan Groff, played by Arturo Castro. And, they speak on the phone, and he's like, yeah, send it to me, and, it'll be up within an hour, if it is what you say it is. And an hour passes, it's still not up. She calls him back, and she's like, yo, are you fucking with me? Are you not going to post a story? And he was like, what are you talking about? I'm still waiting for you to send it to me. She's like, what? And she goes into her sent mailbox, and it, disappears. And then Secretary Hartley walks in to this desolate library where Katie's character is, and Secretary Hartley walks in with, a couple of Secret Service guys, one showing that very big government flex of, we're monitoring and can intercept and block any of your shit whenever we want. But she tells her something that stuck with me. Katie is standing up on her credentials and fact that she did honest investigative journaling and reporting, journalism rather, and reporting. And Secretary Hartley tells her, I'm not denying that you have the right facts, but you're drawing the wrong conclusions, which is really interesting, right? And just made me think in a moment, like, yeah, that's technically true. And I think that happens more often than we realize when different folks see or read the same things, but draw from it very different interpretations. And obviously, as we'll see as the story progresses, that was Secretary Hartley, her, spin on things and way of trying to control shit. But it was definitely a powerful line. Then fast forward to another interaction that Katie has with Secretary Hartley, where she invites Katie to go to her place, ask her all the questions she wants. She'll be completely honest with her. And if after her getting to say her side of the story, Katie still wants to move forward with the story as it was, so be it. Or, at least include Hartley's response to the story. And that's her attempt, obviously, as, being a political character, trying to spin and, save face and shit. But Katie has this back and forth interaction with her, this dialogue with her where she's circling back to some of the things that she mentioned and reconfirming timelines, and pretty much catches Secretary Hartley in a lie and gets her to crack in another very satisfying scene. Satisfying in a different way from like that revenge satisfaction, but still extremely satisfying nonetheless. And that's all I'm going to tell you guys about The Terminal List, because I definitely want you guys to check it out. I don't want to spoil it all for you, because it is a dope series. And once again, hats off to Jack Carr for turning this seed of a story idea into a novel that turned into a soon-to-be 6-book series. Book 6, titled Only the Dead, will be out in the spring of 2023, next year. And then having the universe reward him with Chris Pratt, who he originally envisioned as the protagonist in the story as he's writing it in his book. Read the book, love it, and option it before it even comes out, and then pull Jack Carr into the development process of this Amazon series, The Terminal List, which I'm sure will open up even more doors for him. So congrats again to Jack Carr. And that is my little recap and review on The Terminal List, streaming now on Amazon. Check it out.